Not spoken publicly about this before, but I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells from a boat nearby. What I saw has stayed with me, and I believe it's important information. I have provided or intend to provide my account to the appropriate investigators because Nolan's family deserves the truth. Out of respect for the ongoing investigation, I won't speculate beyond what I personally observed. While I was on the boat near the area, I witnessed an altercation involving Nolan Wells and several other individuals. I saw what appeared to be an argument that escalated after there was a dispute involving Nolan's phone. I heard Nolan yelling for his phone to be returned. The argument continued after the group reached shore, and I observed a physical fight involving Nolan and multiple people. I also observed a young woman telling them to stop. At that point, I left the area because the situation had appeared to be getting worse. I did not remain long enough to witness what happened afterward. Everything beyond what I personally observed would be speculation, so I cannot honestly say what occurred after I left. Then she said she messaged one of the individuals that she saw, hey, I just want to say I was a passenger on another boat and I saw the argument between you guys and we'll go to the police with this information. I also have video footage. My husband doesn't show much, but it shows the argument that was taken and how you guys were upset at Nolan because of the young lady.
Public's urgency to know what happened to Nolan. But we are not taking time for time's sake. We are taking the time required to complete the work this investigation demands. Since Nolan was reported missing, local, state, and federal law enforcement agencies have worked around the clock investigating what happened to him. Every piece of evidence must be examined. Every credible lead must be followed to its conclusion. Every witness interview must be analyzed in context of all other evidence. The pressure for answers does not change what the work requires. Our responsibility to Nolan and our community is to complete this investigation thoroughly, carefully, without compromise, supported by the evidence and worthy of the confidence of the people we serve. I also understand that many people have questions about why more information has not been released publicly. In Mississippi, the rules of professional conduct restrict the information a prosecutor can release during an investigation. Our restraint in communicating facts and evidence is not an effort to keep the truth from the public. It is an effort to protect the integrity of this investigation and the grand jury proceeding.
It could change everything, especially if the video is time stamped. Straight out to veteran trial lawyer, defense attorney Philip Dubé joining me. He is joining us out of L.A., formerly in the public defender's office. They try a ton of cases. Philip, first of all, has she turned it into police? She said she was. If she hasn't, I give her no credibility at all. Look, I want this to be true. Why? Because I want the video. I want to see the timestamp on the video. I want to see, was he still on Horn Island at 4:30 when his acquaintances on the Triton boat left? I want that video. And if she hasn't brought this forward to LE, law enforcement, then it means nothing to me. I mean, if I know a young man turns up dead in the water, and I know there's a controversy surrounding this, I mean, we know she knows that because she's gone online and posted it, then why not hand it over to police?
Agreed. And it should go to the grand jury for part of their investigation. But I got to tell you, if I were cross-examining her, should this even go to trial, the first question I'd ask her on that 4th of July, what she had been drinking. Before that video got activated, everybody would want to
put him up.
Drinking and smoking. You know how many people were partying?
Okay, man. Now? Have you lost your mind? You defend criminal cases. I bet everybody you put on the stand has either been high, drunk, or worse during the altercation. Every witness is not a nun, a priest, or a virgin. Everybody on Horn Island was drinking, man. What are you talking about? I don't care if she took a drink. I want the video.
You want the truth is what you want. You want the truth. And let's
and that would be the video. Yeah.
Remember, Nancy.
Okay.
Not consistent.
Brandon Tatum is joining us. So after all that, all you have to say is, was she drinking? That's your takeaway from that? Joining me is Brandon Tatum, former police officer, Tucson, now star of The Officer Tatum on YouTube, who famously has interviewed the acquaintances who all say they had nothing to do with it. Let's just put that out there. He's interviewed them extensively. I want to talk about not what you want to talk about, Brandon Tatum, which is they had nothing to do with this, because I met them and I believe them. So noted. Can we talk about a potential witness to an altercation? And she seems to suggest it was over Katie. Why? Don't know what the altercation was. Maybe it was, hey, leave her alone and get on the boat, or leave her alone, she's my girlfriend, or it could be anything. But if there is a witness placing Nolan seemingly in the water, I can't tell that, but having an argument with another person, a partier at Horn Island, that is significant. It could prove or disprove your friend's timeline.
Well, Nancy, I think that it's a big obstacle to climb here because I've never heard of this altercation whatsoever. Nobody that I've talked to have alluded that this altercation was real. And also Katie, whom I saw her text messages, she didn't even say this altercation occurred. What I will say is that if I was an investigator in this investigation, I want to hear that. I want to be able to compare that information to other things that we may have or other witness statements. But I don't think it's significant because it doesn't show if Nolan Wells was actually killed in that altercation. She's claiming that there was an altercation between him arguing with somebody else. There was a potential fight, but that doesn't get me to how did he drown? How did he get in the water? And how did he not recover and come home to his family? So I would take that into consideration. I would compare that to the other interviews that I've done, but I don't think it's significant whatsoever. However, I would be incredibly skeptical because there's no other statements that I've heard from anybody that comes even close to an altercation with Nolan Wells and others over a girl.
Okay, I need you to hear this one. Nolan Wells, new altercation witness emerged. What did she see? That's the title. And I need you to sit with that for just a second, because every single word in it is doing real work. This isn't a title built for clicks. It's built around a real woman, a real claim, and a real question that this investigation has not answered yet. What follows this goes 5 chapters deep, a timeline that doesn't hold together, 2 autopsies that couldn't reach a conclusion, a phone returned with messages already gone, federal agents now involved, and a witness sitting somewhere with footage that nobody has officially confirmed. So if you came here for a surface level story, this isn't that. Stay with me. Let's go back to July 4th. Not the theories, not the social media speculation, the documented record. Because when you line up what the GPS data actually shows, what the distress call recording actually says, and what the witnesses actually told investigators, the timeline that has been presented publicly does not hold together. And the place where it falls apart is exactly where Nolan Wells disappears from it. Here's what the record shows from the start of that day. At 9:56 in the morning, the boat carrying Nolan and his group departed from the southern shore of Mississippi. At 11:14 a.m., it arrived at the western tip of Horn Island. That's documented. Mississippi Department of Marine Resources tracked it. When they arrived, roughly 300 people were already on that island, celebrating the 4th of July. By all accounts, the early part of that day was normal. Photos were taken, people were on the water. Nothing in the documented record flags anything unusual in those first few hours. That's the anchor. That's the part of the timeline everyone agrees on. What comes after it is where the record and the accounts start pulling in different directions. At some point that afternoon, the group decides to leave. The reason they give, one of the boats was taking on water. The bilge pump The pump that drains water from inside the hull had stopped working. Now, there's an actual recording of the distress call they made to emergency services. In the recording, the caller tells responders the boat is near the western tip of Horn Island and the bilge pump is down. And then the caller says, "We're going, we're sinking." That's in the recording. So the mechanical problem was real. That part of their account checks out. The boat was in trouble. They needed to get off that island. That's not in dispute. But what happened in the time between that call and when that boat actually left the island, that's where the first major contradiction enters this case. Friends told investigators they last saw Nolan around 3 p.m. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office publicly confirmed that account, saying the last known sighting of Wells was near 3 p.m. that afternoon. Now, pull up the GPS data. According to tracking records from the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, the boat did not leave Horn Island until 4:31 p.m. 4:31. So the group says they last saw Nolan at 3 p.m., but the boat they were on didn't depart until an hour and a half later. That's not an interpretation. That's what the GPS record shows. So here's the question that has not been publicly answered. If the last confirmed sighting of Nolan was 3 p.m. and the boat didn't leave until 4:31, where was Nolan during that hour and 30 minutes? And why does no one in that group have an account of where he was or who he was with during that window? That window is what the independent review of this case formally called a material gap. Not a small inconsistency, not a minor scheduling difference, a material gap, 90 minutes, unaccounted for. Now it gets more specific. Sources with direct knowledge of the investigation told media that authorities have evidence showing Wells was still present on Horn Island after the boat his friends were on had already departed. And it's not just sourced reporting. At least 2 witnesses who were formally interviewed by law enforcement told investigators they saw Nolan on the island after that boat was already gone. 2 witnesses on the record with investigators. So the picture that emerges from the documented evidence is this. Nolan Wells was on that island after his friends left. That's not disputed by investigators. What is disputed is everything that comes after it. Here's the explanation that has been offered for why Nolan stayed behind. Friends have told officials that Nolan chose to remain on the island after meeting a young woman there. The account is he wanted to stay. He made that choice himself. They left because the boat was failing, and he said he would get a ride back later. That is the version of events put forward by the group he was with. Nolan's parents do not accept it. They have directly disputed the claim that their son would have voluntarily stayed behind on a remote island as the holiday crowd thinned out. Those are 2 competing accounts from people who knew him. And here's what the documented evidence actually gives us to work with. The GPS record shows the boat left at 4:31. The last confirmed sighting was around 3 p.m. At least 2 witnesses saw him on the island after 4:31. So there is at least an hour and a half, possibly longer, where the timeline has no verified account of where Nolan was, who he was with, or what was happening. His friends say he chose to stay. His parents say that's not who he was. And the gap in that timeline has not been filled by anyone. Now connect that gap to something else that's documented. Ben Crump, the Wells family attorney, raised the phone argument at a press conference. He referenced a video that was allegedly captured on the island, and said it showed an argument in which Nolan was demanding his phone back. That altercation, if it happened the way Crump described, would have taken place somewhere inside that unaccounted window. Law enforcement has not confirmed that the altercation happened. They have not confirmed the audio. They have not said publicly whether the video Crump referenced was submitted to investigators. But the new witness, the woman on the boat, the one who says she was blocked when she tried to reach out, she says she saw something happen involving Nolan Wells before those boats left the island. Her account, the phone argument, the material gap in the timeline, 3 separate threads, all pointing at the same window of time that nobody has officially explained. By the time that island cleared out, Nolan Wells was still on it. We know that. What we don't know is what happened next. But what the autopsy found, and what was missing from it, tells a story that neither investigation has been willing to say out loud. 2 days. That's how long it took before anyone found Nolan Wells. And when they did, the answers didn't come with him. What came instead were 2 separate medical examinations by 2 separate pathologists with 2 separate sets of findings. Both of them walked away without a definitive cause of death, but one of them found something missing from that body, something that should have been there, that wasn't. And what was missing is the single most important forensic detail in this entire case. On the morning of July 6, a National Park Service ranger located a body at the northwestern tip of Horn Island. The search had involved multiple agencies working simultaneously: the U.S. Coast Guard, the Mississippi Department of Marine Resources, and the National Park Service. The Jackson County coroner confirmed the identity of the deceased through dental records. It was Nolan Wells. The Jackson County Sheriff's Office then made a public statement. They said investigators did not suspect foul play. The Wells family and their attorney did not accept that conclusion, and they made that clear immediately. Now, here's something that hasn't gotten nearly enough attention. On the night of July 4th, while Nolan was still missing, his father called to report him missing at 11:49 p.m. That call was forwarded. What followed was a fragmented response. Confusion between agencies over who had jurisdiction over a remote federal island sitting 5 miles offshore. Hours passed before a formal missing persons report was officially filed. The Coast Guard was eventually notified, but the response in those early hours was not coordinated. In a case involving a remote island, open water, and a missing teenager, those hours matter. Every hour that passes in a missing person situation on open water changes what recovery looks like, changes what evidence looks like, changes what investigators can and cannot determine. The family noticed, and when the official autopsy results gave them no answers, that early response became part of a much larger picture they were building in their own minds. The Mississippi State autopsy was completed after the body was recovered. The results were not released publicly. No findings were shared with the media. No cause of death was announced. No manner of death was stated. The results were sent directly to a grand jury, sealed. That's where they remain. The public does not know what the state's official autopsy concluded. The family did not get the clarity they were looking for, and facing a sealed official report, with no answers coming from the state, the Wells family made a decision. They would find out for themselves. The family arranged a second autopsy, independent, conducted outside of Mississippi. The examination was funded by Colin Kaepernick. Nolan's body was sent to Washington, D.C., where it was received on July 10th by Dr. Roger A. Mitchell, a board-certified forensic pathologist and president of the National Medical Association. Dr. Mitchell examined the body and issued his findings. His conclusion, cause and manner of death, undetermined, pending further investigation. And critically, he stated he could not rule out foul play. That's the official language from an independent, credentialed forensic pathologist retained by the family after examining Nolan Wells directly. Could not rule out foul play. Now, here is what he actually found inside that examination. During the examination, Dr. Mitchell conducted a detailed inspection of the back of Nolan's head and neck area. What he found was a large area of red discoloration, deep in the soft tissue, sitting directly above the back of the skull. No cuts on the skin above it, no fractures in the bone beneath it. Just that area of discoloration, sitting there, with no clear explanation for what caused it. Dr. Mitchell flagged this in his report as a finding that required further investigation. The cause of that discoloration is officially listed as unclear. That means no one, as of this report, has been able to explain why it was there. Now, what I just described is significant, but it is not the most important forensic finding in this case. What comes next is, when Nolan's body arrived in Washington, D.C. for the second autopsy, his throat was not with it. Let me be specific about what that means. The trachea, the laryngeal cartilage, the thyroid horn, the hyoid bone, none of those structures were received with the body. Now, in plain language, here is why that matters. Those are the exact structures a forensic pathologist examines when determining whether pressure was applied to the neck, whether the airway was compressed, whether there was any injury to the internal structures of the throat. Without them, Dr. Mitchell stated directly that he could not rule out neck injury as a cause or contributor to Nolan's death. He assumed the original Mississippi pathologist had retained them, which is a documented practice when there is concern about neck-related injury. But here is what his report actually says. And this is a direct quote from the pathologist's official findings. This pathologist cannot rule out if any intervening non-accidental factors contributed to or caused the death of Nolan Wells. Non-accidental factors. In forensic language, that means something other than an accident, something other than a drowning, something other than a fall. The independent pathologist could not eliminate that possibility because the part of the body that could have answered it was not there. I want to stop here for just a second, because if you're watching this and you haven't subscribed yet, this is exactly why this channel exists. Cases like this one, where the official version has a gap in it this size, need someone who is going to keep going. Every grand jury development, every new forensic finding, every time that sealed autopsy gets closer to becoming public, we will be here covering it in the same depth we're covering it right now. That's not a promise we make lightly. That's what this channel is built on. Subscribe now and stay with me, because the phone evidence is next and the FBI is already inside it. 2 autopsies, both inconclusive, a missing section of the body that could have answered the most important question in this case. But while the pathologists were working, investigators were also looking at something else entirely. Nolan's phone. And what they found on it, or more accurately, what was no longer on it, is a different kind of evidence. And it led the FBI straight to this case. At some point after July 4th, Nolan Wells' phone was returned to his family. That should have been straightforward. A personal item, returned after a death investigation. But when the family looked at that phone, messages were gone, deleted, and that single fact opened an entirely different dimension of this investigation. Here's what the family found. The phone came back to them, but it didn't come back the way it left. Messages had been removed. Now, that phone was on Horn Island on July 4th. It passed through someone's hands between that island and its return to the family. Who had it and when has not been officially explained. No law enforcement agency has publicly stated who was in possession of that phone or for how long between the island and the moment it was handed back to the Wells family. Someone deleted those messages. That's not a theory. That's what the family found when they examined it. The question is who had it, what those messages said, and why they needed to be removed. The FBI is now examining the digital evidence from that phone. And here's what that actually means, in plain terms. When federal investigators conduct a digital forensic examination, they are not limited to what is currently visible on the device. Deleted data leaves traces. Investigators can work to recover messages that were removed, along with records of when they were sent, who they were sent to, and from what location. They can also build a location map tracking where that phone was, point by point, minute by minute, throughout the entire day of July 4th. That includes mapping the phone during that material gap in the timeline, the hour and 30 minutes between the last confirmed sighting of Nolan at 3 p.m. and the boat's GPS-documented departure at 4:31 p.m. Beyond location, federal examiners can determine when the screen was last unlocked, what applications were active, and what data was accessed in the final hours before the phone went silent. That is the level of examination being applied to Nolan's phone right now. No results have been released publicly. The digital investigation remains active at the federal level. But the FBI does not get involved in a local case without a specific reason. Their presence here is its own kind of answer to the question of how seriously this evidence is being taken. Now, the distress call recording that was made when the boat's pump failed. That recording has been examined closely by people following this case, and something was noticed in the background of it. Approximately 12 seconds into the recording, there is a voice. Some listeners believe that voice says, "Is he dead?" Authorities have not confirmed what that voice is saying. It has not been officially addressed by law enforcement or by anyone connected to the group. I'm not going to tell you what to conclude from that. What I will tell you is that it is in the recording. People have heard it. And to date, law enforcement has not publicly explained it. While the digital investigation was building, something else was happening across the country. 3 people from 3 different states were arrested and charged with making interstate threatening communications connected to the Nolan Wells case. Let's go through each one. On July 30th, a man from Sacramento, California, was indicted by a federal grand jury on 1 felony count for sending threatening messages to witnesses. The following day, a woman from Ohio was arrested, charged with making bomb threats directed at the George County Chancery Clerk and the Jackson County Sheriff's Office, both agencies tied to this investigation. On August 4th, a man from Illinois was arrested, accused of threatening witnesses in the Wells case specifically. 3 people, California, Ohio, Illinois, all 3 facing federal charges, all 3 connected to the same case. And the threats did not stop at witnesses alone. The FBI is investigating threats directed at multiple parties: friends of Nolan Wells, their families, Nolan's parents directly, and local and state officials actively working the investigation. Among those affected, Judge Ashley Cole. Judge Cole is a local sitting judge whose son was on Horn Island that day. She wrote publicly that she had deactivated her Facebook account because she feared for the safety of her children. She stated her son had cooperated fully with the sheriff's office and that no one in her family was attempting to obstruct the investigation, but she was afraid enough to step off social media entirely. A sitting judge with that level of concern for a case involving her own son, that is not background noise. That is a direct indicator of how much pressure is surrounding the people who have information about this case. Step back and look at this picture. A federal phone examination, active. 3 people arrested for threatening witnesses. A judge afraid to be online. The FBI investigating threats against parents, friends, and state officials. Witness intimidation at this scale points to one thing: people with information are either talking to investigators or being pressured not to. There is no other reason to reach across state lines, to threaten people connected to a case, unless the information those people hold is considered dangerous by someone. And as of right now, no one has been arrested for what happened to Nolan Wells. Not a single person. The FBI's involvement now covers 2 separate tracks: the digital evidence from the phone and the coordinated campaign to silence people who might speak. Both tracks are open, both are federal, and both lead back to the same unanswered question: who is trying to control what gets out and why? 3 people arrested, not for what happened to Nolan, for making sure witnesses don't talk about it. Meanwhile, a grand jury is being assembled. The official autopsy results are sealed inside it, and the family's attorney is standing in front of cameras, asking a question that cuts straight through everything else in this case. Right now, as you are watching this case is open. No resolution, no charges, no public explanation for what happened to Nolan Wells on Horn Island on July 4th. 4 chapters in, we have walked through a witness who says she saw everything, a timeline with a 90-minute gap, 2 inconclusive autopsies, a phone returned with messages missing, and a federal investigation running on 2 separate tracks. And the answer to the most basic question in this entire case, what happened to Nolan Wells, still hasn't been given. This is where the case stands today. District Attorney Angel Myers McElrath has confirmed publicly that the results of this investigation will go before a grand jury. No date has been set. No timeline has been given to the public. And as of now, law enforcement has not publicly named a single person of interest in connection with Nolan's death. No suspects, no charges. More than a month after his body was found on that island, the investigation is described as active, a grand jury is pending, and the public has been given no indication of when that changes. That is the official status of this case right now. Active, pending, and silent. Now, some of the people who were on that island have spoken out. They have pushed back publicly against what they describe as misinformation, saying the viral content circulating online has driven speculation that does not reflect what actually happened. They have said they want the truth. They have said they cooperated, and that position deserves to be stated fairly. But here is what also needs to be stated. the timeline contradictions documented by GPS data, the messages deleted from Nolan's phone, the witness who says she was blocked when she tried to come forward. None of those things have been explained by anyone in that group. Not publicly, not on record. Saying you want the truth and answering the documented questions are two different things. And right now, the documented questions are still waiting. There is a layer of this case that cannot be set aside. Ben Crump, the Wells family attorney, has formally raised race as a factor in this investigation. Not as a side argument, not as rhetoric, as a direct legal question put on the record by the attorney representing this family. Here is the documented basis for it. Nolan Wells was one of very few black people on Horn Island that day. The group he was with was predominantly white. The town he came from, Ocean Springs, Mississippi, is approximately 79% white. And Mississippi's documented history with racial violence is not a distant abstraction. It is a part of the public conversation surrounding this case, because the people having that conversation live in that history. Crump's position is direct. He wants to know whether race played a role in what happened to Nolan on that island, and whether it has shaped how this investigation has been conducted. That question has not been answered. It has been formally raised, it is on the record, and it remains open. Crump has also taken a direct position on the drowning narrative, and he has rejected it. His rejection is not based on emotion. It is based on documented facts about who Nolan Wells was physically. Nolan was an athlete, a college football player in active training. His swimming ability was known and documented by people close to him. The independent pathologist, Dr. Roger Mitchell, noted in his findings that the significance of Wells's death occurring in or around water, given his known ability to swim, required further scrutiny. And then there is this. In the 6 years prior to Nolan's death, Jackson County recorded 0 drowning deaths at Horn Island. Not one. In 6 years, Nolan Wells is the first. That is not an argument. That is a public record. So here is what remains unresolved, stated plainly, as 4 specific outstanding questions that this investigation has not yet answered. 1. The official Mississippi autopsy results. Completed, sealed, held inside the grand jury, not available to the public, not available to the family. 2. The FBI's findings from the digital examination of Nolan's phone, active at the federal level, no results released. 3. The new witness. The woman who says she was on a boat, who says she has video, who says she was blocked when she tried to reach out. Her identity has not been officially confirmed. Her footage has not been verified. Whether she submitted anything to law enforcement has not been publicly established. 4. The material gap in the timeline. The window between 3 p.m. and the boat's departure at 4:31 p.m., the hour and a half that the documented record shows that no verified account has filled. 4 questions, all of them documented, none of them answered. Nolan's mother has spoken publicly about what this family needs. She didn't ask for speculation. She didn't ask for theories. She asked 5 words. What happened to our son? That question has not been answered. Not by the sheriff's office, not by the state medical examiner, not by the friends who were on that island, and not by the grand jury, which hasn't convened yet. So this is where the case sits. The investigation, open. The grand jury, pending. The witness, unverified. The phone data, unreleased. And the questions that sit at the core of this: who was with Nolan after those boats left, what that witness actually recorded, and what was in those deleted messages remain unanswered. DAV crime records will cover every development in this case as it happens, not when it's convenient, when it breaks. When that grand jury makes a move, when those sealed autopsy results become part of the public record, when that witness is either confirmed or discredited by investigators, we will be here covering it with the same depth we brought to this video today. If you want to be here for that, subscribe right now. Turn on every notification. Because in a case with this many unanswered questions, the next development could change everything, and you don't want to miss it.